We welcome you into the Cross Country Mortgage Campus here in Berea. This is the best podcast available, and the 2024 NFL Draft is officially in the books with maybe the longest day 3 that I have done in 12 years, joined by staff writer Kelsey Russo. The draft is over, and it's time for us to break it down here on the best podcast available. Kelsey, let's get down to it. Are you surprised that this team made all 6 picks?
When I was thinking about this, at first, my initial thought was yes. But then when I kind of honestly took a second to think, yes and no. When I went back and kind of looked at AB's history of drafting, he's traded the last 2 second rounders that they had the last 2 years. The 7th rounders I wasn't expecting us to take. But then when looking at the 2025 picks, with the multiple 6th-round picks, it kind of made sense that they stayed where they were at because of what is to come and, being able to move around. Maybe what I was thinking was that they would have packaged some of those and moved up in the draft or different spots. But in the end, it kind of does make sense just kind of considering their future. So yes and no. Yes,
I'm going to have a conversation with our general manager on the number of 7th-round picks that he chose to keep. But that'll be a conversation for another day. But they do make all 6 picks, and he doesn't make any trades on draft weekend. And we've got 6 new football players, and obviously there'll be more added as we go. The undrafted free agents, the scouts burning up the phone lines. I've seen Mr. Cooper go by, our capologist. Andrew Berry quickly, as soon as he was done with this press conference, going back to his office. Still some work to be done on this roster, and he did say that in his press conference post-draft along with head coach Kevin Stefanski. Still plenty of work to do. But we do have 6 draft picks, and it starts off in round number 2 on Friday night. Pick number 54, according to Dane Brugler, the 5th best defensive tackle in this draft. Mike Hall Jr., not Michael. Mike yes. Hall Jr. from The Ohio State University, now a Cleveland Brown. Your one thought on Mike Hall Jr.?
So, yes, one thought. He is...
If you have more, you can. You can pull a Zagura. Zagura sometimes has 6 or 7 for the one thought.
Okay, they all kind of go together.
Perfect.
So, one big thought. I really liked what Andrew Berry had to say yesterday about Mike in the sense that he's tailor-made for this attack style defense. Just someone who's explosive, he's quick, and how he can rush the passer. Glenn Cook also described him as a shapeshifter, which I really loved. Just his ability to attack the quarterback, I think, is something that on the interior, the Browns could really use. And today, Barry added to that saying just his ability to rush, just as from a physical standpoint, but also his feel as a rusher, I think is a really unique skill set that they can use from a young guy.
And he's battled a couple injuries, and we're going to have to work through that. I think maybe some opportunities are going to come with all 6 of these guys on special teams.
Yes.
You're going to make your mark early. It's probably going to be on special teams given how deep this roster is. But, you've got some older guys on that defensive line. And everybody came back, which is awesome, and I couldn't be happier about that. But you do have to have an eye on the future. And Ika last year and now Mike Hall Jr. this year, I would think would lead you to think that these are the guys that they're grooming to eventually take over some of those spots.
Yeah, and they can learn from, guys like Myles, like Mo, who came back, Zedarius, all those guys that have really just created this defense that they had last year. They can learn, they can see how this works and find their way in the NFL, which I think is a really good opportunity for them.
I mean, and this is a guy that in early mocks a month ago probably was in the 3rd round. Now he goes in the 2nd round at pick number 54. On to the 3rd round we go, and at pick 85, the Browns go get a guard. And it's been a little while since we've gone after a guard in this draft, but they do, and they go to the University of Michigan and defending national champ Zak Zinter with pick number 85, 6'5", almost 6'6", 309 pounds. He's been through the building on Saturday, got a chance to sit down with him. Very, very impressive young man, and a guy that's going to get a chance to learn behind some really good players. And again, this pick maybe with an eye more toward the future.
I think that was kind of the thinking behind it, especially because he's coming off that leg injury that he endured against Ohio State last year, breaking the fibula and tibula. That's
at the hands of our defensive tackle.
Yes, which was crazy. They talked about that today. Just kind of how crazy it is, the fact that happened, and now they're both here with the Browns. But what I thought what really stood out to me today was the fact that he was talking about how he's fully cleared, he feels really strong, that he's made a lot of progress, and that he feels confident that he'll be here ready for rookie minicamp later this month, which I think is a really big deal for him to be able to acclimate super early with this team. And the thing that really stood out to me from Andrew Berry was saying that he's an excellent pass protector, which I think is something that on that offensive line, from a young guy that he can learn, can grow, and really add to this offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I think he and Wyatt Teller are going to hit it off. It could be a very dangerous combination, the two of them together, between the hunting, fishing,
yes.
the love of the guns. But clearly, here's a guy that has a lot of upside, a leader. I think Andrew Berry was quick to point that out on Friday night. Blue collar, but a guy that knows how to work, wants to work, and wants to be a key member of a football team.
Heartbeat of the culture at Michigan was how he was described. So I think that's a really cool trait for him to bring here.
Absolutely. All right, on to Saturday, and the longest day maybe that I've had in 12 years. We did a draft show for 3 hours. We did not make a pick.
That is crazy.
We're going to kind of need to tweak that next year. But I never thought that would actually be the case. But the draft seemed to come to a crawl in the 4th and 5th rounds, which I could not figure out for the life of me. There was a lot of trading. There was a lot of moving around. This draft was a draft with a lot of runs.
Yes.
Wide receiver or defensive tackle or corner, or then the running backs went. It just came in bunches. But the Browns had to wait till the 5th round, and at pick 156, Jamari Thrash, wide receiver from Louisville. However, before that, at Georgia State.
Yes.
And then entered the transfer portal after 4 years, but made his mark at Louisville. Wasn't recruited by any of the Power Fives, but then had his pick of the Power Fives when he left Georgia State.
Yeah, and the Browns really see him as a receiver who can be productive both inside and outside, which I think is a really unique aspect of his skill set, and a solid playmaker with the ball in his hands. And Andrew Berry, again, described him as an outstanding separator, which I think for a wide receiver is a really good trait to have, especially with this offense. So I think he has an opportunity to develop under, guys like Amari Cooper, like Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, who can really find his way and learn the nuances of the league, the nuances of route running in the NFL, and develop into, a good wide receiver.
Well, I mean, and you take a look at the wide receiver room, and now you've got 9 wide receivers.
Yes,
it's a very, very crowded wide receiver room. The one thing he doesn't have a lot of experience in is special teams, which I was a little surprised by.
Yes.
But again, here's a guy like everybody else that was drafted here this weekend. They're going to have to find a way and make their mark in special teams sooner rather than later if they want to get on the field.
He said he was a gunner at Louisville, so which I think is a cool element on special teams that he can bring and really dive into to find that role, especially early on.
Yeah. I think the other interesting thing, when he transferred into Louisville, 7 of the first 8 games, he led the team in receiving.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And then a broken hand he had to fight through for the last month of the year. But a guy that made his mark in an ACC situation. So a guy I think that definitely bears watching because he has the speed, but he also has the ability to go and get the football, which is something I think that this team is going to need here. They're going to need someone to stretch the field to allow Jeudy and Cooper and Njoku to go underneath and make the plays that they do.
Absolutely.
So on to the 6th round we go. Nathaniel Watson, linebacker, Mississippi State. There were some questions. I know Andrew Berry said we were very comfortable with the person. The player, obviously, they were comfortable with as well. But Nathaniel Watson from Mississippi State, linebacker, he made some plays in 23. I think he led the SEC in tackles. So here's a guy that we needed another linebacker, you go and get some youth there.
And, one of the traits that, one of the scouts talked about with Watson was his toughness and intelligence at that linebacker position. That's what really drew them to him. And, he's really good in the run game, particularly with his strength. And I think one of the things that Andrew talked about as well was, with the changes in the kicking game, that maybe some guys that have that size could be necessary. And so, again, another opportunity for somebody on special teams to find their mark with their skill set. So those were kind of those elements that really stood out about Watson that drew them to him.
I think the other thing to note is every year AB and coach, they go and they get a guy from the Senior Bowl. Mm-hmm. He was a top linebacker on the American team at the Senior Bowl. He's got great genes. He's got a great uncle and an uncle that both played in the league. I remember Tommy Agee with the Cowboys winning Super Bowls in 92 and 93. I'm old. It happens. But, I mean, here's a guy that, again, if you look at if I can pull up the linebacker room here in my notes, we lost some guys.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of a leadership void. And, JOK and Jordan Hicks are going to be counted on heavily. Devin Bush is, I think, a wild card. But if he can play the way he did when he was drafted, I think the sky's the limit for him. But this is a guy, along with Tony Fields, that you can continue to develop into some big-time players potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely agree.
All right, on to round number 7 and 2 picks. AB, we don't need this. 2 picks in the 7th round.
We need answers.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, we do. However, they get a corner, and we had been told leading up to the draft, day 3, there's going to be a lot of corners available. And they go and get Myles Harden, a corner from South Dakota. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so AB was talking about how his instincts and versatility really stood out about what he can bring to that, or with his skill set to that group. And I really think it's an opportunity to develop a young guy behind somebody like Greg Newsome, behind somebody like Denzel, who can grow and find his role. But I think, that versatility is a good trait for him to have with the secondary and being a young guy in that mix.
Yeah, I think that they're 5'11", 195 pounds. It's interesting. We've had the conversation all weekend about age, because normally you're drafting guys, you're trying to draft guys that maybe are a little younger. This team has done that, but the COVID era has pushed the age limit up.
Yeah.
And he's 23 years of age. He had plenty of opportunities to leave, was very loyal to South Dakota because they gave him a chance and said, I'm staying here and I'm going to play out my career here and get my degree. I think he's a fascinating prospect because Dane Brugler had a 5th-round grade on him.
Yes.
And there were other guys from an analyst standpoint that had him with a much higher grade. And there were a lot of teams that were circling the wagons. They thought he could be one of the higher undrafted draft picks to go after. So we've seen a lot of buzz about Myles Harden, but a guy that could fit right into this room. And Cam Mitchell's in his 2nd year. You've got Denzel, you've got Emerson and Newsome, but you got to build depth behind.
And we saw too, you think about it, a lot of it with injuries with that the Browns dealt with last year. I think a lot of that is a part of this, of just building depth, because you don't know what's going to happen. And obviously you're hoping nobody gets hurt, but you can't predict what happens. And so having guys that can step in like we saw last year, this is kind of another opportunity for somebody in case that does happen.
Yeah, and we talked about it with all 6 guys needing to play special teams, but there's a chance. We went through 5 quarterbacks.
Right.
We went through how many running backs? There are possibilities for all of these guys to play at some point or another. You hope that's not the case from an injury standpoint, but if you're on the 53-man roster on this football team, you need to be ready to play. And this coaching staff's proven that they can get everybody up for the task and up for the challenge. Final pick, 7th round, pick 243. Jawan Briggs, defensive tackle, Cincinnati. I got a little flyer right before we went on, but otherwise, I don't know a lot about him, but you've already written about him on clevelandbrowns.com.
Yes, wrote a little bit. Did a lot of research in the moment because I also did not
Seventh round.
But he's a local guy. He's from Cincinnati, he started off at Virginia and then transferred and finished his collegiate career at Cincinnati. Okay. So that's a cool element to him as a person. He can, again, another guy that can develop under this veteran defensive line. One of the things that Andrew Berry talked about with his skill set is his movement ability, and I think that is an element that they can, really foster and develop over time of how he fits with this defensive line. He was a team captain in 2023. He tallied 27 tackles and 6 tackles for loss last season. And he also earned all Big 12 honorable mention accolades. So, I think there's some elements there. His coach also reached out and said that, he was really excited that the Browns drafted Jawan and just, that he got this opportunity for his family, for him, and that he sees him, that he could have an impact with the Browns early on because he was a pro while in college. And so I think that's a really cool testament to hear about his character from his coach, especially for a late round guy like that.
So those are the picks in the 2024 NFL draft for your Cleveland Browns. The one pick that you think helps this team the most in 2024?
So I was thinking about this.
Yeah.
I do think it's Mike Hall. I think that is the guy, even as a young player, he's 20, so he is young. And even with so many veterans on that defensive line, but I think the way that defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz rotates the guys on that defensive line, and knowing that Schwartz was so excited that they drafted him, so excited.
See a lot of emotion.
No.
But he walked by our window last night, and we were like, okay, so they went defense.
Yeah, he was clearly. He was excited, and so I think that those elements, I think he could find maybe, obviously not going to be a starter, but finding his role, finding those opportunities that he can have an impact early on, and I see that as just he has that opportunity to have an impact next season.
It's okay. You should have seen me earlier trying to talk. It was pretty impressive. On the defensive line, it's all about rotation and with this football team. So, you could get in a rotation that has 6 guys, 7 guys getting snaps.
Yeah.
So, definitely an opportunity for him to work his way in right away and make an impact on the interior of that defensive line. Is there a position on this team you'd still like to see addressed?
Yes. I think there's kind of 2 for me, honestly. I think tight end,
Yeah.
Obviously, that group is led by David Njoku, who had a stellar 2023 season, and, they went and signed Giovanni Ricci in free agency, and you have Jordan Akins in that group as well. But I think there could still be some depth there, especially if there's different ways that they could use 2 tight ends in their offense, as we've seen in the past. And so I think that could be some depth. The other one I was thinking about too is running back. They did not take a running back in the draft. While they did sign some guys in free agency, I still think there are some questions about that group, especially not knowing completely, Nick Chubb's health. Obviously they believe he's on track and he's trending in that direction, and that's awesome. That's what they want, but you just don't know until the season
and Nyheim
comes.
Hines is coming back from injury as well.
Yes, exactly. And so, and obviously, Jerome Ford had a stellar 2023 season, stepping into that featured back role. Pierre Strong Jr. had those moments where he was able to come in and have an impact. And so, but I think there's still an opportunity there to add depth to round out that position. And I know they also signed Deonta Foreman, but still I think there is that opportunity to find some depth there, just not knowing and being able to find a rotation that works well, if guys are, just kind of depending on how the season plays out with that group. So those are kind of my 2 that I was thinking about.
I think that's a good move. I wonder if the Browns had a 4th-round pick if they don't go tight end or running back in that, because that's where you saw the run on both those positions, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the tight end one especially was Zaire Mitchell-Payton, too. He's a great blocker. Fascinating to see how that room plays out. I think Akins would tell you that he didn't have the kind of year I think he was hoping to have.
Absolutely.
Maybe he gets some more opportunities with Harrison Bryant now gone. Something to watch for sure, especially at the tight end position. So in 2025, never too early. I mean, according to the scouts, they start on Monday working through that. They own their own picks in rounds 1 through 4 and round 6. They have 3 6th-rounders, and they have 1 7th. Thank God.
Back in the first round.
And more importantly, back in the first round. So,
Thursday night activity. We'll be ready to go.
I won't know what to do.
No, same.
Well, and we were talking about it. Like, we haven't had one for 3 years, but really we haven't had one for 4 of the last 6 because we didn't have it in 19 because of the Odell trade.
Right.
So then we had 20 with Wills and 21 with Newsome. That's it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's been a while since we've had a first-round pick.
Wow.
And the excitement that goes around with having that first-round pick. So appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is time to go celebrate the weekend, and we'll leave it at that. Want to thank Jacob Griffin and Jacob Malensik for their help. For Kelsey Russo, I'm Jason Gibbs. You can like and subscribe today to the best podcast available wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/Browns. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to the best podcast available.